Shadespire. Many grand cities arose in the Age of Myth, only to be sundered by rampaging armies and the wills of terrifying gods. Few were more glorious than Shadespire, the city among the dunes, and fewer still fell so completely. Shadespire once stood as a shining metropolis, a beacon of power and prosperity in the grim and withered realm of death. Its glass towers glistened with precious stones of every hue, casting iridescent reflections across the surrounding desert of bones. Now, it is a cold and desiccated place, stripped of its luster and utterly cursed. Its once magnificent spires are little more than crumbling protrusions that claw lifelessly at the bleak sky. Its outer districts are slowly subdued by the encroaching skeletal dunes that are blown ever inwards. The city has all but faded from memory, and those few who have heard the tales of its former glory speak of it only in fearful whispers. The very name of Shadespire is a curse, and is synonymous with damnation. In the Age of Myth, the founders of Shadespire set out to create a waypoint in the middle of the Desert of Bones, a safe haven for travellers and merchants on the treacherous journey between distant realm gates. The enormous desert was perilous to life, as the gusts of the wailing wind would strip flesh from the bone and carry the etheric essence of a body away to the silent wastes. But amidst the shifting mountains of lifeless remains, the oasis of souls was found. This twisting network of canyons cut deep into the compacted bone sediment beneath the dunes, descending far further into the darkness than those who discovered it dared venture. They knew not what had formed this plunging abyss, but the wisest among them believed it to be a locus through which the flowing energies of Syash converged. Perhaps the morbid ley lines cancelled each other out at this point, preventing the death-soaked earth from coalescing, or perhaps the conflux of grim magic caused the realm itself to waste away under the unbearable weight of moribund energy. Whatever its nature, shelter was found within the many recesses of the oasis, as was water and stubborn patches of Shyash's vegetation. As the first weary vagabonds explored the caves further, they found their spirits invigorated, bolstered against the surrounding lifelessness, when in the presence of the inky black ores that ran in seams through the caverns. It was from this place of respite that the first shanties and stories of Shadespire arose. The waypoint quickly became a town, which then became a bustling hub of commerce and culture, with humans, elves, and Duardin from every corner of the realms passing through its gates. Massive towers were built at the centre of the burgeoning city, which could be seen far off into the surrounding barrens. The wonders of distant lands were brought to Shadespire to be traded, and sharp-eyed collectors scoured its market squares for tomes of knowledge and curiosities imbued with magic. The weaponry and spellcraft of 1,000 kingdoms was brought here, inside the city walls, and here it was combined, adapted, and refined to produce artifacts of unequalled power. The ingenious creators who were able to craft such objects were rewarded with riches and vaunted in Shadespire's high courts. A ruling elite emerged, known as the Katophranes, and their glory continued to expand with their boundless innovation. All paid tithes to the Katophranes for the privilege of entering their city, and emperors and warlords alike bowed in deference to their might, entreating them for tools to help them conquer new lands. The Katophranes' greatest work was the crafting of glass made from the dark ores within the Oasis of Souls. Shade glass, as they called it, could capture the essence of one being at the point of death, before the soul was seeped away to the underworlds. With shade glass, the knowledge and memories of the dying could be preserved, and the Katophranes were able to live beyond their mortal years as pure thought, unshackled from their aging bodies. Exquisitely crafted mirrors and illuminated panes were given places of prominence throughout the city, all of which were connected by the crystalline monument known as the Faneway, the nexus through which all soul energy passed. The Katophranes, preserved within their prisms, communed with one another and oversaw their city, and together they revelled in the powers that they had mastered. In the middle of a lifeless wasteland, in the Amethyst realm itself, they had conquered death, and in doing so, they roused the undying wrath of Nagash. From the cold stillness of the underworlds, the great necromancer cast his spiteful gaze upon Shadespire. For too long, the Katophranes received tributes from others, while at the same time denying Nagash his rightful tithe of souls. This was an insult that could not be borne, and the god weaved a hateful spell, drawing upon the power of the shade glass that was sown throughout the city. The inhabitants of Shadespire would not simply be executed for their heinous debt. For those who had tried to deny death, there would be a far greater punishment. As Nagash unleashed his sorcery, the soul of Shadespire was severed from reality. Every living creature within the city was siphoned into oblivion, leaving no trace of their existence, save for the desolate ruin they once called home. The treasures of the Katophranes. The remnants of Shadespire lie forgotten in the Desert of Bones. Each year, more of the city succumbs to the harrows of age, and more of its buildings disappear beneath the towering dunes. Its former glory has been utterly excised, yet the wealth that it held is still there for the taking. When the soul of Shadespire was stolen by Nagash, those kingdoms that had traded with the desert city cowered in fear, wondering if the great necromancer's wrath would also fall upon their territories. Returning envoys who had left Shadespire before its demise were slaughtered upon reaching their homelands, a precaution lest they carried with them a portion of the god's curse. Tomes of law concerning the city were put to the torch, and to utter its name was deemed a blasphemy, an affront to Nagash that was punishable by a torturous death. Shadespire and the Katophranes were spoken of no more, and in time both ebbed into legend. Though forgotten and reduced to a hollow skeleton of the metropolis it once was, Shadespire still lies where it died in the desert. The abundant treasures that had been collected by the city's living inhabitants for countless generations remain untouched. Within its mausoleum halls lie the wealth of untold empires, paid to the Katophranes to procure but a modicum of their profound wisdom. Gemstones gouged from mined Nashqui and gold ingots from the hills of Shaman sit nestled amongst piles of gathering bone dust. The works of master artisans are scattered haphazardly through buildings that have thus far withstood the erosion of malevolent gales. Even in the outright slums, small trinkets sit on tables in the gaunt abodes that have not yet been buried under the roving mountains of the desiccated remains. So plentiful were these riches during Shadespire's ascendancy that they distracted the roaming eyes of the city's many supplicants from the true treasures that lay secreted beneath the surface. The greatest creations of the Katophranes still reside in hidden chambers carved into the bedrock, sealed behind ornate cogwork doors that bar entry to those who do not know their secrets. Libraries of the arcane lie behind lock and key, their shelves packed with tomes of lore harvested from the greatest scholars of the realms. Unassailable labyrinths lead to vast alchemical laboratories that, despite the passage of time, still hum with the slowly bleeding power of transmuted metals. In the sprawling outer districts below watchhouses that dot the barren streets, weapons engraved with complex runes line the racks of secure armories, their innate magic shielding them from the gnawing effects of corrosion. However, no treasure was more precious than the knowledge of Shadeglass. The encrypted tombs that record the process of its crafting and the implements with which it was fashioned are still guarded by the deadliest designs of the Katophranes. The fractal passages that were built to access the Shadeglass foundries deep within the Oasis of Souls confound those without knowledge of their construction. Elaborate blade traps set in the joins of seemingly mundane masonry still wait to be sprung, having lost none of their lethal potency over the passing centuries. Sorcerous wards and golems laced with veins of Urgold wait in silence to be activated by those who do not have the permission of their creators to pass. The Katophranes went to great length to protect their most sacred discovery, and though they kept its secrets, the damnation they incurred was shared with all of Shadespire. Across the centuries, among people scattered throughout the mortal realms, rumours of the Katophranes' fate has persisted. Most of these exist as folk legends about a great mirrored city, serve as a warning to the listener about the dangers of displeasing the Lord of the Dead. With time, the name and details have become clouded, but all tell of the Katophranes' extravagant wealth, their incomparable ingenuity, and their ultimate hubris. A rare few claim to have crossed the deadly dunes, to have found the desolated city, and to have returned alive. They talk of a haunted place where the people of Shadespire once lived, still heavy with the fell power of Nagash. They tell their companions vanishing without trace in the winding alleys of the dread city, leaving no body or worldly possessions to be found. Most chilling are stories of the shattered shade-glass panes littering the street. In them are glimpsed twisted faces screaming out from a dim illusion of the city that once was. They appear briefly before disappearing, leaving only a foreboding reflection of the beholder. As Sigmar and his allies push back against the legions of chaos, the forces of destruction and death continue to bring ruin to the last stubborn remnants of civilization. On all sides, the power-hungry and the desperate seek new tools of war to shift the teetering balance of power. The ambitions of the embattled are ignited by whispers of Shadespire, of the once mighty Katophranes, and of the treasures that lie waiting in the desert. Stories are told of relics that could win wars across the mortal realms, and so, after centuries of silent crumbling, Shadespire has once more become host to the living. Only the determined survive the long trek through barren dunes. Scouts and warriors set out in small parties, for the attrition the Desert of Bones would wreak upon an entire army would be too devastating for any general to bear. There are no charts to guide the journeys across the vast wastes. What maps did exist were destroyed long ago, either burned for fear that they carried the taint of Nagash, or torn to shreds by the barbaric followers of the ruinous powers. After months amidst the skeletonizing vortexes of the wailing wind, the hardy, the guileful, and the lucky approach Shadespire. Inside the ancient walls, there is even greater peril. Decrepit streets give way to yawning chasms underneath heavy footfalls, and buildings collapse on passers-by without warning as their brittle bone mortar finally succumbs to the erosion of time. Those who are separated from their party are cut down in the deadly lattice of traps laid down by the Katophranes, or are devoured by unseen dark forces that still haunt every corner of the city. By far the greatest threats to a warband, by far the greatest threats to those who come, are others who have arrived at Shadespire, seeking the same arcane rewards. Every echoing alley is a perfect site for ambush, every desolate market square a potential battlefield. Roving mobs of mortals, beasts, and demons prowl the wrecked city like scavengers picking clean a colossal corpse. Each is prepared to fight to the last, and should they secure the power they seek, then their enemies will tremble before them, both in Shadespire and in the wars of the mortal realms.